day.
Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. It's your girl Imani DH, and I'm here today back with a brand new video.
Dealing with my stress, dealing with your stress, and you know
as you guys know, I did the video on FGM a few months ago, and you guys know I love to do topics that are to do with women and women's stories and just different things to do with us. So today I'm very honored and privileged to be sitting here with this beautiful lady. So this is Olga. So I'm here with the beautiful Olga. She is a qualified gynecologist, and today we're just going to talk a bit more about women's bodies, women's reproductive organs, our health, and all things that she's going to explain better, because I'm not the professional she is, and I know a lot of women, like, we want to learn more about ourselves, and for some reason some of us don't really know enough about our bodies, and sometimes I guess we shy away from it as well. So she's going to tell us everything that we want to know. Just quickly want to say, don't forget #EndSARS. What's going on in Nigeria is crazy, but don't forget #EndSARS.
Over to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
So it's a brief introduction about myself. So my name's Dr. Olga Elizabeth Nkwam, and I am specialising in obstetrics and gynaecology. So I'm a doctor who specialises in the care of pregnant women. So that's from preconception all the way up to them having their babies, and also 6 weeks after having the baby. That covers the whole of obstetrics. Gynaecology itself covers all things women's health, so all your women's health related problems. And we also do any types of surgeries, operations to do with the female reproductive tract, which I'll talk to you a bit more about later.
Amazing. See all the words, I was just like, yes, I love successful women, accomplished women. So I'm just like, I'm learning. That's amazing. So like, I've got people to ask questions, they're burning questions, and we're just gonna go through some topics that a lot of women want to know. Before we continue any further, this amazing company called Fleur sent this box. Now it's a new company that provides boxes for women when they're on their menstrual cycles, and it's called Fleur. So it's come in like this really cute box, and let's just open it up and see what's inside. Wow. Okay, so it's got like chocolate, biscuits.
Oh, that's so cute.
And it's got like pads as well. I think you get a choice of tampons or pads, like depending on what you're comfortable with, and it just makes your period a lot more like bearable.
That's the word.
Something to look forward to every month. So I know they are launching soon if they haven't launched already, and I just think this is amazing. Like, I'm definitely subscribing to this, like, without a doubt, especially if you've got like stressful periods and you just want something to kind of relieve your stress. This is perfect. Biscuits, chocolates, we've got this. One question I want to ask you, what was it that made you go into gynaecology?
Oh, that's a good question. I get that question quite a lot, actually.
Why do you think it's important? And it probably goes without saying.
So when I decided I want to be a doctor, that's probably when I was about 14, 15, I always had sort of an urge and a passion to do something that was in women's health. That's probably because of my Nigerian background. So I know that maternal health in Nigeria is probably one of the worst places in the world, actually, for various reasons, and I wanted to be able to do something that could actually make a difference there eventually. I also think as women, sometimes we aren't heard, our voices aren't heard so much in healthcare, especially black women, for various reasons, which I'll talk about later. But that was also something I felt that if I went into this profession, I'd be able to make a difference. My job is never boring. I do a variety of different things. I talk to patients in clinics, I operate, so it's just given me the opportunity to do lots of different things. It's quite a hands-on profession as well, and I'm quite good with my hands, so that's why it suits me.
That's amazing. So if you could just tell us like how your journey was into medicine, so how many years did you do and everything?
The course itself is a 5-year degree, but within that 5 years you can choose to do an undergraduate degree, so a BSc degree, in 1 year as well. So I chose that, so I was at university for 6 years and I came out with 2 degrees, an MBBS, which is your medical degree, and a BSc, which I have in basic clinical sciences. So So once I finished that long journey, 6 years, so from the age of 18 to 24, you graduate as a doctor. And in the UK, you have to do 2 years as a foundation doctor. So you rotate through different specialties every few months and just get a feel of what it is like to actually be a doctor and work and do the nights and all that. And at the end of that time, that's when you get to choose your specialty. But I knew I wanted to do obstetrics and gynaecology, so I applied for a job. So there's an X amount of numbers available in the country, and you apply, you go for an interview, and then they say, yeah, you've got the job depending on the region that you applied for. And the training I was saying earlier is 7 years. So that's another 7 years. After you've already done your 6 years medical school, 2 years as a foundation, another 7 years. Ooh. Until you become a consultant. But I tell you now, I'm not in any rush. I'm just taking it as it goes. I'm enjoying what I'm doing at the moment. Yeah, I'm doing my 3rd year of specialising, so kind of almost halfway there, we'll see.
Wow, so beautiful,
oh, come
educated, accomplished, successful. What else again? There's nothing left. Are you single?
Yeah.
Guys, start off with like the autonomy, is that the right word?
Anatomy.
Anatomy of the vagina. Anatomy of the vagina. It's crazy, we should know this, but a lot of us don't really know this because it's inside, right?
Exactly. We're just going to throw it back to GCSE biology roughly. So some of you might know this already, depending on sort of what you learn at school, but I've got a little diagram here, so hopefully it's showing up, and this is the female reproductive tract. So I think we'll start with the main thing here, which is this triangular organ here, and that's your uterus, guys. So your uterus is also called your womb, same thing. It's made up of 2 layers. So the outer layer is the myometrium, and that's a muscle. So when you're having your period pains, that's what's contracting and causing you all that pain. So yes, period pain is real. It's a muscle. The inside of it is called your endometrium, which is the lining. So that's what sheds every month when you have a period. So that's what bleeds, yeah? Your myometrium and your endometrium. So here, these 2 structures hanging off of the uterus, it's your fallopian tubes. So they are the passage for the egg that gets released every month when you are having a period. And it travels down that fallopian tube, and it's also where fertilization takes place. So that's where the sperm swims all the way up into that tube and fertilizes the egg, and that's how you become pregnant. The ovaries, again, should have 2 on each side. They sort of hang on the sides there, and they house all of the eggs. So as women, we're born with all of our eggs. We don't produce any more, and by the time we hit puberty, we probably have about 300,000 eggs. However, during a lifetime, we only release about 300 to 400 eggs, throughout your lifetime, and then it obviously stops when you reach the menopause, so you will have no more periods. The ovaries are also really important. Why? Because they secrete the hormones that are responsible for our periods, and the 2 main hormones they secrete are estrogen and progesterone. I might talk about that a bit more later, but that's why the ovaries are really important. Down at the bottom here, guys, we've got the cervix, also known as the neck of the womb. Really important. During childbirth, that's what dilates up to 10 centimetres when you're having a baby and allows the baby's head to pass and the rest of the baby to be delivered. And it's also really important because it can be a common site of cancer. I'm sure we've all heard about cervical cancer. So that's what gets sampled when you go and have your smear tests. So that's a bit of basic anatomy there for you.
Amazing. I got a lot of, when I put out on Instagram and on Twitter that I was gonna speak to you and interview you, I got a lot of questions and concerns about periods.
The bane of a woman's life.
And menstrual cycles. So a lot of people, they wanted to know things to do with periods, how do you pronounce it?
Endometriosis.
Endometriosis, fibroids. So like, could you just tell us a bit more?
Menstrual cycle. So the average cycle length is 28 days, but this can vary massively between women. So some women's cycles might only last 21 days, some might last 35 days. But on the whole, we say the average cycle length is 28 days. And we can divide the menstrual cycle up into sort of 4 stages. So the first stage begins from the first day of your period. So when we're thinking about, when we ask questions or when was your last period, we're asking about the first day that you bleed. So not the day that it finished or how long it lasted. When was the first day you started bleeding? And that's the beginning of the cycle. Again, this can vary wildly between women. Some women's periods 2 days, some can last up to 10 days depending on, you know, you. But on average, it's 5 days. So we say that our first stage of the menstrual cycle is 5 days long, and that's from the start of the day you start bleeding till the day you finish your period. The second stage is from whenever you finish your period up until mid-cycle. So if you have a 28-day cycle, that will be from day 5 up to day 14. And what happens during that time is obviously you've shed away all that lining of your womb, having your period. The body spends the rest of that time building that lining up. And that's important because on day 14, or middle of your cycle, whenever that is, that's when you ovulate. That's when your ovary releases that egg. That only happens one day. That's a one-day thing, guys. The body releases the egg one day mid-cycle. And the reason that your endometrium, the lining of the womb, was getting thick again is because it wants to accept a fertilized egg. So it's preparing for that fertilized egg to embed inside the endometrium.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes,
you know how you said it's just one day?
Yeah.
Does that mean you can only get pregnant one day?
That's a really good question.
Okay.
So you release the egg on one day, and remember the egg's got to travel all the way from the ovary through the tube, so that takes a few days.
Okay.
And if we think about sperm can live inside of the body for up to 5 days.
Okay.
So you can't only get pregnant on one day, guys.
Okay.
It will be a few days around your ovulation. So that's why it's
Okay.
actually quite important if you are trying to get pregnant to learn your cycle and know when you're ovulating. And there's lots of different apps and things around at the moment that can help you with that. But yeah, to answer your question, you can get pregnant on days around your
Okay, so it's like 3 to 4 days, or
yeah, roughly. So it will be 3 days, 2 to 3 days either side of. So there is a relatively large window of time that you can get pregnant.
Okay.
However, guys, if you don't get pregnant, if that egg isn't fertilized, then we have the stage 4 of the cycle, which is when the endometrium, i.e. the lining, starts to break down, and then that starts cycle again. You have your period.
Okay, so that lining breaks down because the egg hasn't been fertilized.
Exactly.
So that cycle is just waiting to see, is the egg gonna be fertilized?
That's the whole
or
point.
not?
Exactly.
Wow.
The whole point of periods is so that we can get pregnant.
Wow.
Literally.
That's crazy.
Literally.
That is so.
As women.
That's so crazy. So, what is the cause of? Because I got a lot of questions. What is the cause of period pain? Because a lot of people say, what is the cause of period pain?
And yeah, this is something I see a lot in my gynaecology clinics. We get referrals from GPs for women who have unbearable period pains. So, periods themselves, without an underlying cause, can be very painful. As I explained before, it's a muscle, your uterus. It has to contract in order for the lining to shed, and that can cause pain. Imagine a muscle contracting away. So that on its own can cause pain. Other conditions, though, that can be associated with increased painful periods, things like endometriosis, that's a separate thing. So I'll talk a bit about endometriosis now.
That's fine.
If you want,
yeah.
Cool. So endometriosis is quite a debilitating condition. I see lots of women in clinic who have been suffering with it for years. Initially they thought, oh, it's just because, I've got painful periods, and they try and ignore it, but it can be very, very debilitating. So what causes it? Essentially, the same cells that line the inside of your uterus, so the endometrium, for some reason, and we're quite unsure why that happens, they can actually grow in other places inside of your pelvis. So we're thinking things like your bladder, your bowel, sometimes the vagina itself. So every time you have a period and you're menstruating, those cells are also having a period, and that can cause a lot of pain during your period. It usually starts a few days before because of the hormonal interaction. You bleed quite painfully during the period, and also can have other symptoms like pain during sex, pain when you're opening your bowels, just because of where those tissues are deposited. Yeah, it's a really, really quite difficult condition to have, as well as to treat.
Okay.
There are different ways we can treat it.
Okay, so that's an underlying condition of period pain, but naturally period pains don't always have an underlying condition. Is there a distinct difference between just period pain and there's an underlying condition that we need to check out?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So if somebody feels as though their pain during their period is not quite normal. The GP should be able to start you on, basic painkillers, paracetamol, ibuprofen. Something a little bit stronger than ibuprofen, called mefenamic acid, is also a first line for period pain. However, if despite all of this the pain isn't going away, you're still getting painful periods, also if you're concerned about other things, painful intercourse or pain opening your bowels, etc., then the GP should really then refer you to a gynaecologist so that we can potentially work you up for potential other reasons as to why your periods are so painful.
Okay, that makes sense. So guys, if any of you are having period pains and you are uncomfortable and you suspect that it might be like a cause for concern, see your GP. And
definitely.
these are some of the things
Don't ignore it.
Yeah, because you never know, it could be an underlying issue, or you might need to get prescribed some medication for it. Do you also, in your experience, is it natural for period pains to get more painful with age?
So that's actually a really interesting question. So some people that I've come across would say that their periods became worse after childbirth.
Okay. Oh my God.
Again, I know, I don't know, I'm not entirely sure why, but that's what I've heard. In terms of age, I don't know whether there's a direct link between that and age. I know obviously as you become older, your periods on the whole tend to regularise a bit more, become more regular. As you're younger, it tends to be quite an irregular pattern, so maybe.
Okay. So I wanted us to speak about some of the misconceptions about vaginas and female sexual health.
Right.
So yeah, I know that's
it's a big topic, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a big topic.
So broad. Yes.
Wow. So I will probably just talk about a couple of things that I hear, social media, misconceptions, which I want to debunk today.
Okay.
So one of the things that I hear quite commonly is that the more sexual partners a woman has, the looser her vagina would be. I mean, you've probably heard that before as well.
Definitely social media.
Social media tends to, trumpet this idea, and it's on the whole men who don't have vaginas who feel the need to chime in on such topics. I want to debunk that now. That's absolutely not the truth. So the vagina is a muscle. It stretches and relaxes as any muscle in your body does. It stretches to accommodate penis during intercourse. It stretches to accommodate a baby's head as it passes through the vagina during childbirth, and it can retain, it can go back to its original size. So the actual length of a vagina, average length, obviously it would change depending on how tall you are, etc., is about 5 centimetres, but during intercourse it can elongate up to 10 to 12 centimetres, and then once you finish having intercourse it goes back to its normal sizes. The vagina is a muscle which is held up by your pelvic floors. That's why pelvic floor exercises are really, really, really important to do. So they're the whole structure and the whole support for your pelvic organs, your uterus, your cervix, your vagina. Everything's held up by this pelvic floor. So if you've got a strong pelvic floor, then in essence everything else will be strong as well. So that's the main thing, and it has absolutely nothing to do with how many sexual partners that you've had.
Okay, that's a great. So she's told you. You heard it here.
Heard it from me.
Yes, the gynecologist told you. You can't argue with the gynecologist. Okay. Okay, that's a great one that we've spoken about. Also, a lot of people had questions or concerns about contraception.
It's a big topic, isn't it? I love contraception.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you take the lead because you might direct the conversation a bit better. Yeah. So a lot of people, have concerns and questions about contraception. Also, another thing that I do know from experience is that contraception isn't only used for preventing pregnancy.
Very
there
true.
are other reasons people use contraceptions, like hormonal issues, also to regulate periods.
Exactly.
So if you could just enlighten us a bit more, educate us more.
Yeah, I'll try. So contraception is a massive, massive, massive topic. But like you said, there's different reasons why women might want to start some contraception. So on the whole, we tend to divide contraception into hormonal contraception and non-hormonal contraception. So non-hormonal will be condoms. Some of you might know there is a male condom and a female condom. Don't know how popular the female condom is, but it is out there. And hormonal things would be things like your pills, of which there are a wide variety. The two main ones that we tend to use are the combined pill, and we call it combined because it has two different types of hormone in it, estrogen and progesterone. You've got the mini pill, which just has progesterone in it. Other things that contain hormones that people can use for contraception are the coil. So there's two types of coils. There's the Mirena coil, which contains progesterone in it, and then there's the copper coil, which has absolutely no hormones in it at all, but can also be used for contraception. So depending on, so there's lots of different things that would depend on what type of contraception you might want. If you're looking for long-acting contraception, then things like the pills won't be good for you because you have to remember every day to take it. If you want something that's there and you don't have to worry about it, things like the coil, which can last for up to 5 years, the implant, which goes underneath your arm here, that can last for up to 3 years. Probably better options for you if you're somebody who thinks, you know, I just don't ever want to think about it. But the hormonal pills themselves are really good for things like managing the pain of endometriosis, because endometriosis is a hormonally driven problem, and also for people who have irregular periods, because it helps to regulate the period. However, a period that you get when you're on the pill is not a true period, and that's because of the different hormonal things going on. The combined pill, the estrogen and progesterone, essentially when I explain it to my patients, I say it basically makes your ovaries go to sleep. So you actually don't ovulate when you're on the combined pill. However, the hormones inside of your body cause you to shed the lining of the uterus whenever you stop taking that pill for 7 days. Wow.
Because of recent, I've seen a lot of discussion on social media, and it's like a lot of women are becoming more aware of the damages or long-term damages that contraception can cause. So in your opinion, do you believe that women should stay away from contraception? Because I always feel like if not contraception, what else?
What else?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, people need to be practical.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
what do you think?
I know it's a really interesting question. So I know there's a lot going on about, so the longer that you are on a contraceptive, potentially the more difficult it might be for you to conceive. And there's been loads of studies on it, and I think there are too many variables, i.e. differences in women themselves, for us to definitively say that if you are on the pill for 10 years, you're going to struggle to get pregnant once you get off it. It will vary from woman to woman. If you want a long-term contraceptive and it works for you, it works for your lifestyle, most times, worse when we're busy, like if you don't even want to think about having a period because that's just not something that you want to have to deal with in your day-to-day life, then there's absolutely no reason to have a period. Periods, like I explained before, are there because you ovulate to get pregnant, and if you're not trying to get pregnant, why have a period? That's personally my advice.
So do you think, like, I don't know, you know more than me, I'm just going to give my opinion, yeah, but is it like, because for me, like, every month I get a period, I'm like, why are you here?
Why?
But then, do you think it's damaging to tamper with the way it's supposed to be?
You know,
like, tell us the truth. You'll know.
No, it's a good question. So a lot of women have the mindset that I just want to be natural. Let my body do what it wants to do naturally. I don't like taking synthetic hormones. And you know what? They're not without their side effects. We know about the side effects. So mood swings, breast tenderness, headaches. And you know, if you really want to avoid that, then that's absolutely fine. However, if you are having unprotected sexual intercourse and you do not want to have contraception, then you need to know your cycle to a T if you are not trying to get pregnant. So that's my advice. If you do not want to get pregnant, but you don't want to use any hormonal contraception or non-hormonal contraception condoms, you're not trying to get pregnant, then know your cycle. Obviously we use condoms, they're not just contraceptive, they are protective, they protect us against sexually transmitted infections, so it's also to be aware of, guys. But if you're in a committed relationship, you don't really want to get pregnant, you're not really keen on any hormonal contraception, then know your cycle.
Yeah, you heard it from the gynaecologist herself, know your cycle. We're talking about contraception, and we spoke about childbirth and people, concerned about, if I use the pill for so long, is it going to affect me having, being able to have children? I wanted us to talk a bit about fertility, and because a lot of us are getting older now, thinking about marriage, long term, and starting a family, exactly. So I always say to myself that fertility is a funny thing, because you can't really know how fertile you are.
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't show on the forehead, does it?
This is the point, and you don't know that you're going to have problems conceiving until you try. And a lot of us career women are trying later, and we know that age can affect your fertility. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation, to be honest. Yeah, it's a big thing that is quite, you know, coming to the forefront, especially in media, not just social media in general, about women starting their families later than usual. Obviously, I'm sure our mothers had us much younger than. I think my mum finished having a family by the time she was my age. She had 4 children, so I feel like it is a big thing.
There's no way to know. So are there fertility checks? Is that a thing?
So on the NHS, not necessarily. Okay. So I'll briefly explain. So depending on where you live in the country, depends on what type of fertility services are available to you. It's the same NHS, however, it will depend on where you live, so that's something to think about. On the whole, if you have been having regular, unprotected sex for up to 12 months and have not conceived, then you should be referred to a GP who specialises in, a gynaecologist who specialises in fertility to investigate further. And there's lots of different investigations that you and your partner will offer to you to see whether there's actually a root cause of your infertility. Okay. In many cases, we don't find a reason. That's something else as well to just let you know. We don't know. Okay. Partner sperm count is fine. Your hormonal levels are okay, but there's just not a reason why you're not getting pregnant. But there are certain things that especially black women, that might affect our fertility, and the topic I wanted to talk about was fibroids. Okay. I think I was quite, you had lots of questions about fibroids, didn't you, which disproportionately affect black women. Okay. We're not entirely sure why, but we do see them more commonly in black women, up to 2 to 3 times more commonly than our white counterparts. So fibroids are benign growths or benign tumours, so benign means non-cancerous, that can grow from the uterus. And depending on the location of those fibroids, they can potentially affect your fertility. So if they're growing inside of the cavity, so where the endometrium layer is into the cavity, that can disrupt where the egg fertilises, hence why it might be more difficult for you to become pregnant. Fibroids can also cause you to have heavier periods, which means that you bleed more often, and that can also make sex very difficult if you're constantly on a period when you're going to have time to have intercourse. So that can also make it a bit difficult for you to conceive. However, if you are adamant of starting a family and you are known to have large fibroids that might be affecting fertility, that's where you get referred to gynecologists who specialise in fertility, who can offer you potential treatments to remove the fibroids sometimes, if that's possible, depending on the location, which can then hopefully increase your likelihood of getting pregnant.
Okay. So is there any cause? Do we know the cause of fibroids?
I wish we did, literally. Wow. So there's been genetic, lots of research into it, but one thing we do know is that it does disproportionately affect women.
Wow, so we don't know the cause.
We don't know the root cause. So there is a genetic link as well. Sometimes if your mother has it, if you've got women in your family who have it, then that can also increase your likelihood.
Okay, wow. So we've definitely learned a bit more about fibroids. Thank you so much. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to touch on is that I've read that I believe African, Caribbean, black women are correct me if I'm wrong, 4 times more likely to die during childbirth. Yeah. And I saw a tweet on Twitter where a young lady said to her partner, she told her partner this statistic, and her partner said to her that black women should take more responsibility when it comes to their health. So I just wanted to get your opinion and expertise on this whole topic. It's
a big topic, and it's come to the forefront more so this year. There was a report done called the Embrace Report, and Embrace stands for Mothers and Babies Reducing Risk Through Audit and Confidential Inquiries, and that's done by a research group in Oxford University who looked at outcomes for women during the pregnancy and also afterwards, 6 weeks after pregnancy. And it revealed that black women are 5 times more likely than their white counterparts to die during childbirth or in the immediate postpartum period. So why is that? Why? So a lot of the sort of conversations that we've been having around this have to do with race inequality within healthcare itself. So a lot of the time, for example, let's take midwives for example, depending on where exactly in the country that you have trained, a lot of the time you would be used to treating youngish, white, slim women during looking after them during the sort of childbirth, and let's be honest, that model doesn't really translate across to, you know, different women, different ethnicities, etc. So if that is what your normal is, I feel like it makes it more difficult for you as a clinician to spot things that aren't necessarily following with the norm. There's also a misconception as well sometimes that black women have a higher pain threshold, and I actually don't know where that's come from. But that's also something that I've read quite a lot in the literature about us having a higher pain threshold, therefore, you know, we should kind of ignore things that actually could potentially be quite serious. Other things to mention is that people would say, you know, maybe as black women we were at higher risk of certain things during pregnancy, high blood pressure, diabetes and things like that. Preeclampsia is a big one, which is, you know, that might well be the case, but that doesn't explain why we are dying more. You know, the condition is there, it's common, treat it every day. Why is it that black women are dying more from having something that is, you know, something that we do see and we treat it quite often? The questions are there, but actually, thankfully, quite recently, July of this year, the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecology put together a committee called a Race Equality Task Force. Essentially, it's a group of, I think, midwives, obstetricians, gynecologists, who are coming together to have a discussion and really think about why is it that Embrace report has reported that black women are 5 times more likely to die during childbirth in the UK. Guys, this is not abroad, this is here, this is happening here today. So that task force aims to sort of answer all of these burning questions that we have. I have the same question. I honestly, in my opinion and in my practice, I still cannot understand why this is happening, but it is, the numbers don't lie. So at least the task force has been started. I'm sure that they're very much in their infancy, it's very early on, but I'm hoping they give us some more answers to questions that we really, I think we all want to really know why this is happening.
Sounds like negligence and
there's a lot to unpick, but if they do bring out a report soon enough, then I will definitely get my teeth into that and decide what's going on. Guys, just to let you know, this Embrace report, it is, you know, you just go onto Google and you can find it yourself. It's not, you don't have to be a doctor to get access to this, it's public information if you want to have a bit more of a read. So it's not very dense, it's quite simple. There's lots of just pictures and diagrams that you can kind of get your head around to understand this a bit more.
Okay, so what advice would you give to women, pregnant women, and actually maybe not even pregnant women, just black women in general, who have certain concerns about their health, and you know, they go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, just pushes them to the side. Like, what advice would you give black women? Because you know, a lot of, like what you said, we're told, or with people think we have a higher threshold, which isn't true, you know? True. So what advice would you give black women?
So I think one of our greatest tools as women is education. I feel like we need to educate ourselves more on our own health, because that gives you the confidence almost to speak to a doctor and say, I know this is not right, you need to help me. And when I say education, guys, I don't mean go and get a medical degree, I'm not saying things like that, but just if you try to learn your body a bit, it then gives you information and things that you can talk to and bring to a doctor and say, I'm not happy with this. If a doctor fobs you off, you are well within your right to seek second opinion. If you're not happy with your own GP, you can well ask to see another one, because most practices will have more than one GP working there. And yeah, I say if you really feel that there's a problem, don't stop until you find your answer. Even if the answer isn't always the answer A that we want. And a lot of the time as doctors as well, we do a lot of investigating and we still don't know why. And that does happen in many cases as well. So also just be prepared to potentially get that answer that actually we really don't know, which can happen.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a great answer. So as she said, if you feel first of all, educate yourself, and then you'll be able to know what isn't right. And once you feel something's not right, push. Let your doctor know. Listen, I don't feel okay. Something doesn't feel right. Like, don't shy away from that. No, don't just take a no for an answer.
Because who knows your body better than you?
Exactly.